Hello and welcome back to the AI-powered GP series in association with SS&C Intralinks. I'm Nicholas Neveling from Real Deals. In today's episode, we're looking at how AI can help emerging managers to instill operational discipline and speed up responsiveness without the need to invest in large back-office teams. Joining me today to discuss these themes, we have Neil MacDougall, who's the chair of Sophora, an emerging manager based in Germany, and Olivier Mangez, who is the head of alternatives for SS&C Intralinks, EMEA. First question I wanted to ask both of you is this question of the operational model, the rails that GPs need to run on. And Neil, firstly, if I could ask you, if you compare the tech that Sophora is running on today, how does it compare to what the typical setup would have been for a mid-market firm 10 to 15 years ago? And how has that changed what a firm can do and also what it's able to achieve?
There was a time where you could get away basically with the Microsoft Office suite, shared directories, probably a fairly basic accounting system which recorded the drawdowns and payouts and the valuation of your portfolio. You might at that stage have recently implemented a CRM system which you felt really proud about. And you thought you were quite tech-enabled based on that tech stack. So that's, say, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So going back to your question, it's changed considerably. In terms of what does it enable, it probably reduces some of the sort of less value-added parts of what people used to do in the past. So in the past, you'd get given a ton of information, which you would then lift and represent into an investment committee memo and hope that you'd answered all the questions that were going to get thrown at you by IC. That was purely mechanical in many cases, and that's can be done sort of in a blink now. So, for example, we've uploaded into Claude all of our deal selection criteria. It's got a very extensive framework, and then we will basically upload confidentially, GDPR compliant, etc., the info we've been given, and Claude will generate for us an IC based on our own framework. And then, of course, you have to review that, make sure it actually stacks up, because Claude isn't infallible. That sort of drudgery bit, which would have taken several days, takes minutes.
Olivier, maybe just to come to you to pick up on some of those points, it sounds like AI really is a game changer. Technology is moving so quickly, and that presents complexity for emerging managers, but I imagine it also opens up opportunity. And I wonder if you can give me a perspective on whether these tech tools now give an emerging manager the scope, the capability, the bandwidth to sort of almost match what you would see, a much larger firm being able to do with much bigger resources and a much bigger back office.
Yes, it's a very good question, Nick. I think that what really AI enables is the ability to scale without growing the headcount. And one of the constraints of emerging manager is the very lean organization. But today, the private markets are very, very competitive. And even emerging manager will compete with much larger organization. And AI enabled them to do this. You were talking about the quantity of information that the system can process. It's really, really valuable. And I feel that emerging managers have very strong competitive advantage is they start from scratch. Established manager, it requires a lot of effort to transform and to adapt those technologies. Emerging manager, they can just start easily. There is no cost of migrating, no cost of structuring the data. They just need to do it right from the beginning.
On that point about speed and capability and the scope to be able to compete with a much bigger, much better resourced organization, what does that mean in deal processes, especially deal processes that are very competitive, where speed is a differentiator and it can give you an edge? Is there an application there? Can these tools help an emerging manager to accelerate a due diligence process, to get ahead of the competition, to get their bids in first and improve their chances of winning the deal?
of course. And I think that for a private equity firm, there are two sides. There is the sell side and the buy side, right? Speed has always mattered, even before AI. But really now the technology allows you to really increase your productivity. On the sell side first, nowadays the window of opportunity to sell an asset got shorter and shorter. You need to be able to get ready very, very quickly. And I think that AI allows you to do this. You can do document summarization, you can do extract insight from your document set. You can prepare the due diligence process that you are going to launch yourself. This is really on the prep phase, and so you can get ready very, very quickly. It's absolutely critical, and it really matters today because, again, the PE world is a very competitive world, and the first bidder is get a competitive advantage.
Yeah, definitely. Neil, Sephora's in a slightly different part of the market. We know that the big competitive auctions are there and they're a reality. But I guess where you're positioned, you're doing primary deals, teams that have maybe never done a transaction before. So I guess the ask is different. How are you using AI in those situations to expedite the process, give yourself a better chance of deal execution, etc.? What is the application in your sort of circumstance?
When you meet an owner plus manager, sometimes they're the same person or group of people, you have a short meeting to evaluate them and for them to evaluate you. And if you come into that meeting really clueless about what their business actually does, not just the broad sector, but their business, what its history is, where it is now, where it might be going in the future, you're probably going to lose that opportunity. If you've invested the time and energy to become as fluent as you can, obviously there's lots of information you still won't have, there's no way of getting it, but if you do have access to everything that is available and you ask the right questions in a polite and friendly way, you will have a different experience, and the management team will and the owner will have a different view of you. So you can really differentiate your origination by being a lot smarter and not just asking about numbers, which most founders find really boring, and actually talking about the more interesting things that really matter to them in terms of what are their challenges, what would they like to do next, what are the opportunities they want to take advantage of, rather than tell me about your business.
You spoke earlier about how in previous cycles, a lot of manual work, a lot of heavy lifting for your teams. PE is a people business. How is AI helping to free up teams from those repetitive tasks? Maybe you could share some examples. And if you're able to take that load off people, does it improve, their day-to-day experience of work? Does it free them up to do more interesting kind of work or more value-added work?
I think the answer to that one, Nick, is that within a PE firm, even a small one, lots of people have different roles. And the tasks and what becomes sort of repetitive, to use your phrase, it varies depending on what you do. So one of the less value-added but essential things is onboarding new investors, okay? All that sort of know your customer, all the documentation, all that sort of stuff, you can't ignore it. It's really important. If you make that experience as painless as possible for LPs, they love you. Okay, it's a point of differentiation because they don't like doing it either. So, that's one of the areas that we have invested in. There's a German company that actually has a very nice product that does that sort of thing. But other people do it as well. But it's an area that you can make the friction points on a fundraise a lot lower.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Neil. Olivier, maybe just to wrap up on this point, so how can a technology platform mitigate key person risk and burnout risk, especially for a manager, an emerging manager that's growing really quickly, and there's a lot of conflicting responsibilities and a lot of demands on teams.
It's absolutely key. The emerging manager will rely again on a very lean team, wants to scale. how do you make sure that everything runs without having one employee being the bottleneck or the weak link, right?
Okay.
And yeah, it's by leveraging AI, both leveraging AI and information management. That is, how do you collect information, make sure that the PE firm have tons of data, tons of information. The question is the information accessible, right? If it's in your mailbox, it means that your colleagues cannot have access to it.
I wanted to ask a question about the decision around when you make that investment in technology and when you make the decision to upgrade your capability to institutional quality, if I can put it that way. Olivier, I imagine that's quite a big decision for an emerging manager, especially as they've grown their team and lots of demands on their resources. What are the risks of putting that decision off? I imagine there's always a temptation there for managers to say, let me just wait until the firm's a bit bigger, maybe I've got a bit more fee income, I've got a bit more resource to sort of take the step and invest in the technology platform that I need. What is the risk of putting that decision off too long?
First, you need to realize that the world is judging you on a day-to-day basis. You were talking about LPs and their experience and how you're building a good relationship with them or you're not building a good relationship with them. It's the same with potential acquisition that you can make in the future, etc. So people are judging you based on your operational model. That is, how fast are you reacting? How professional you are? Can you manage scale? That is, when you're under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, because you're trying to run multiple deals at the same time, does your organization support this? And I feel that if you postpone too much investment into technology, you're taking almost a reputational risk, right? But for me, the bigger risk is somewhere else. I was mentioning it earlier. Emerging managers, they have a competitive advantage. They start from scratch, okay? They don't have a legacy information system. They don't have a legacy process. They can make it right now. If they postpone, they will become an established manager, and they will face the risk and the challenge that the established manager are facing today. So postponing is actually abandoning this competitive advantage, and I think it would be a very sad decision.
And Neil, and I think you alluded to this earlier when you said your tech stack is not something that you invest in and then it's done and you never have to think about it. It's a constant sort of iteration and constant improvement. I wonder if you could just share your experience at Sophora, a relatively new team, a new firm. How have you thought about how to pace your technology investments? And I wondered if you might be able to share things that you've prioritized and done, and perhaps sort of any things that you would like to do in the future.
Well, going back to what Olivier said, we had the great benefit of being a startup.
Yeah.
Good thing about startups is that the people who are doing the startup make the decisions and then live with the results all together. So there's a very fast feedback loop. If you look at my colleagues Benjamin, Jenny and Guntram, for example, who are the partners, they're kind of tech native. They started off intending to build a platform which was tech heavy. Doesn't mean it needs to cost a fortune, because there are different solutions out there depending on the size of the enterprise, and the way you pay for your technology these days is more SaaS than it used to. The old perpetual license where you pay it all up front, that's gone. So the budget doesn't necessarily have to be a constraint, but you have to be very interested in selecting the right sort of functionality, the right vendor to deal with your particular situation. Then make sure that everybody is equally enthusiastic and uses it. But that whole sort of approach, tech is actually something that we value. It's an area where we're happy to make the investment and to do it up front. That's been the ethos since 2022 when we set up.
You mentioned data and some of the risks that can come with data. I wonder if we can dig into that in a bit more detail. And firstly, Neil, again, it'd be useful to maybe just get some context here. Firstly, is it true that the volume and the type of data that a PE manager has access to now is much greater than it would have been 10 to 15 years ago? If so, what risks does that present? I think you've alluded to some of those. And also, what opportunities can that unlock when you do have all this information available?
Well, you used two words there, Nick, and I
Okay.
think they're quite importantly to distinguish them.
Okay,
There's
yeah.
data and there's information. Data is not information, and information is an abstract. I think you have to be careful and really understand what is it that you're interrogating that data to produce. It's understanding the question is the first part to understanding the answer. And if you don't understand what you're actually interrogating your data for and why, you may not understand the answer. So there is more data. Everybody produces data. Some of it, as we've talked about, is highly automated, so it comes at you whether you like it or not. But that ability to synthesize it and turn it into real information is where I think the key skill is. We're working on it. We don't have the solution at the moment, but it's something that we're, going back to the data warehouse discussion, we do have to collect it first before we can actually synthesize the information out of it.
Okay, great, Neil. Really helpful. Olivier, just to close on this topic, how can an AI-enabled model or an AI-enabled firm be able to, harness that data in a way that is, genuinely strategically valuable in the way that Neil sort of described? It's not necessarily straightforward.
Yeah, I think there are easy ways to do it. There are some platform I was mentioning, Deal Center, Fund Center, that allows you to collect the data in a secure way. Absolutely agree with you. It's a critical aspect of it. You don't want your data. You want your data to be available to you. You don't want your data to be available to others, right? But the easy way is put in place some repositories, allow people to contribute to it.
Okay, Olivier, thank you. Right, final thoughts just to pull this all together. Olivier, if I could come back to you. Do you observe any kind of delta starting to open up between what we could describe as a tech-enabled or front foot sort of GP when it comes to technology, and I guess maybe GPs that are sort of holding on to those legacy models, still a lot of manual processes? Do you see that difference starting to open up?
Yeah, 100%. I think that LPs, again, they judge you based on how you operate. In the past, technology was a differentiator. Now it's not a differentiator anymore, it's a filter. That is, you're in or out. So it's absolutely key. And I think that nobody can afford not to explore technology. But eventually, we don't really care about the technology. What it really matters is what it enables. And again, people are judging you. Your LPs, your competitors, they look at how you operate, and they can feel if you do everything manually or if you are relying on technology.
Neil, you mentioned earlier in our conversation how you're really using or leveraging technology in your origination process, not just in the back office. And I wanted to ask you, over the long term, does tech enablement increasingly become one of the predictors of front office success and of a manager's ability to deliver ultimately the performance, which is why we're all here?
Particularly in German mid-market, lower mid-market, which is our target. Technology in Europe has been embraced. It was one of these sort of, America does everything. Well, it's no longer the case. And data sovereignty and stuff is driving even more of it into Europe than ever before. So there are lots of opportunities, and we're very much up for whatever comes next and getting really stuck in to make sure we're at the front of it.
A perfect note to close on. Neil, Olivier, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nick.
What we've picked up from this conversation today is that AI is a game changer for emerging managers. It transforms the back office process. It frees up teams from mundane tasks and unlocks value by giving people the opportunity to work on tasks that really add value. This is the concluding episode in our AI-powered GP series. If you've missed the previous episodes, they are available on Real Deals. Thank you for watching.